Ready? Francis Ngannou enters his fight this coming January against Ciryl Gane to unify the heavyweight championship with no more fights on his deal after this fight. So I think he Dana did an interview with Brett Okamoto, and from what I understood, in the event that Francis wins against if he beats Ciryl Gane, while there's like no more fights on his deal, like he doesn't have two more fights remaining, I think there's like some kind of champion clause where like you have to fight one more time. I don't know what the language is. I'm not entirely sure how it works, but I believe that's what Dana said. Because I think Brett was like, so like, what happens if he wins? He's like, he's got one more fight. Like he owes us one more fight after that. So I think something contractually makes it so he has to fight again. And I'm assuming if he says not to, then they'll strip him of the belt. I don't know. That's what I think will happen. But that's the situation. So let's say in the event, well, I mean, okay, so if he wins, he has that one more fight. So the whole issue, apparently, per Dana, is Francis's management. And because Brett was kind of asking, like, why, like, what's the problem here? Why aren't we getting more fights? Why isn't there a new contract? And he was saying, like, some fighters have good managers and some fighters don't have some fighters have bad managers. And I think he was also kind of insinuating, like, some managers don't look out for their fighters or something like that. And it sounded like he was kind of implying that they didn't have Francis's interest in heart. Doesn't necessarily mean that's true. I mean, Dana's also a businessman on his end, so they might be trying to say something in favor of the UFC. But like, let's say, because I think I asked you a question before we started it, so I'm going to ask you the same question again. I want to hear your answer. So let's say they don't get the deal done with Francis and Francis loses. Because the other thing before you answer that, one of the last things that Dana said about that matter is, if Francis wants to be with us, we'd love to have him. And if he doesn't, no problem. So given that, what do you think, what happens to the UFC in the event that Francis doesn't sign, like they don't get a deal with him, and then he goes to like whatever, Bellator, ONE, PFL, anywhere else? How do you feel?
I feel like that's doing himself a huge disservice, man. And I feel like
doing the UFC a disservice?
Doing Francis a disservice. Like,
for sure. But I mean, on the UFC, like the business side, we'll get to the Francis side too. But like, does it business-wise make sense?
I'm sorry, what?
Business-wise, do you think that makes sense from the
UFC? No, absolutely not. I think you do everything you can. You send Usman to go talk to him for fucking the entire year, trying to whisper in his ear, like, drop your management. Usman's with Ali?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, dude. You know what I mean? And they're Nigerians, right? Both of them? Or no, Francis is not. He's from
Cameroon.
Whatever, man. My point is that, look, Usman's right here, okay? He's right there. Look at his face. Dude, talk to your boy. Tell him, like, hey, what are you doing? Come over to the dark side. Ali will take care of you. That's what should happen. UFC should put pressure on Francis's, like, homeboys. Make sure that he actually gets proper advice.
I think Francis was saying, because I believe when he beat Stipe, or was it the guy he fought before Stipe, which was Rosenstrike? Who did he fight before Stipe? Yeah, Rosenstrike. Maybe it was after Stipe. After one of those two fights, he went on Mike Tyson's podcast. And Mike Tyson asked him, how much money did you make on that last fight? You better have made some nice money. And I think Francis said he made $500,000. And Tyson was like, what? As in, that's it? He's like, dude, you gotta make sure you get paid this and that. And then Francis's manager was there. He was like in a different room, and Mike Tyson calls in the manager. He's like, you gotta take care of this guy, this and that. I'm not saying necessarily it's because of Mike Tyson this is happening, but I understand, obviously. I think he for sure has room. Like, he has not just room. I mean, like, he has some pool to be like, hey, give me more money, right? I think he's for sure a marketable guy. Like, when he's talking, like, he's very soft-spoken, but he's humble. He seems like a cool dude. But it does seem like he's kind of disengaged almost of late, which kind of makes sense because look at that timeline, right? From June 2019, he fought only once in 2020, which he wasn't happy about. So that was almost a year between fights, and then almost another year between fights from May to March. And then he didn't fight for like 4 months, and then the UFC makes an interim belt. So I can understand Francis being upset because he had to wait almost a year to fight for the belt between Rozenstruik and Stipe. He beat Stipe, and then the UFC doesn't even wait that long before getting an interim fight schedule. So I can understand him getting upset. But apparently, from the UFC side, the issue isn't Francis, the issue is his management, and the issue is the negotiations. Now, what exactly is the issues there? I haven't seen anything, I haven't read anything, so I don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But now, obviously, if you look at the heavyweight division, if you lose Francis, the heavyweight division is pretty top heavy. If you go like below in the rankings, if we pull it up there.
Well, before we go too deep into the weeds on that, like I just want to point something out. Like we've discussed this at length before too, where yes, you're the best fighter, you're the champ, whatever. But look at what happened to Colby, right? Like he was a fantastic fighter too, but because there's no persona, there's nothing there. Like what business sense does it make to keep you around, right? Like I can argue here that Derek Lewis is somebody that you would want to keep around all the time. Tai Tuivasa coming up is somebody you'd want to keep around all the time. They're entertaining. They're characters. They're people that will draw you in. Look at all the top paid guys. You got Diaz, you got Connor, you got Masvidal, Colby. They're all characters.
Izzy.
Izzy. Oh, absolutely. I forgot about Izzy. Sorry, dude. Even Usman, he's an unlikable character in my opinion, but he's a character nonetheless. Aljamain Sterling, I can't stand the dude, but there you go. He knows what he has to do. He has to play those annoying games on Twitter, but it works.
So are you saying like Francis is almost too nice?
Potentially, man. I mean, if he gets cut, I would say that it's two things.
It wouldn't be a cut in the event that we don't see him again after if he loses and we don't see him in the UFC. It's not technically him getting cut. It's just he fought out his contract. But the thing is, the part of what you're just saying, huh?
Is that not effectively the same thing? Like
no, because cut is like if you have fights remaining, I think, and they're like, all right, see ya. Like I think that's what happened with Silva. I think Anderson Silva, I believe, had one more fight left. And the UFC's like, no, dude, like
that's different. They're literally trying to save Silva's life, is what.
No, but was. I mean, like the situation where you have a fight remaining or something, and then they just get rid of you.
Yeah, no, I got you.
But the thing with Francis, where I kind of disagree with what you were saying in terms of like some kind of persona or a character or whatever, for him, I don't think he necessarily needs it, because if you just watch what he does in the octagon with some of these people, right? First of all, he's massive, so that's already an appeal, because visually you're like, what the hell am I looking at? This guy is gigantic. And then when you see him get inside an octagon, you're like, oh my gosh, he takes up the entire thing. And then when you start swinging, you're like, holy crap. Like I can't, if I look away from the TV for half a second, someone might be dead on the floor and I missed it. So I think he already has that. So I don't think he necessarily needs the rest. He's got at least 5 straight knockouts. I'm not even clicking see all on his fights. Yeah, 5 straight knockout wins for Francis. So he'll put you 100% finish rate. He's putting people almost near their grade. The thing though, what I was mentioning earlier about like the heavyweights being pretty top heavy, the UFC as a whole right now, not just the heavyweight division, as a whole, the company is thriving, right? Like Dana has talked about it, how like 2020 was a great year for them. And then 2021 was even better. And they think 2022 is going to be even better. I think the reason Dana can kind of calmly, whether he's being completely serious or not, but I think the reason he was able to calmly say, if he wants to stay, we'd love to have him. And if he doesn't, no worries, is because of how successful the company as a whole is right now. And not just the heavyweight division, but holistically, everything is going so well where they probably feel like they can take the chance of, fine, if he doesn't want to take what we want to pay him, then let him go somewhere else. Because having said all that, if Francis goes to Bellator or Francis goes to Singapore and fights for one, or goes to PFL or goes to Ryzen or goes anywhere else, do you think anyone's going to care? Like, are you going to watch him? If he goes to Bellator, maybe I'll watch him because I have Showtime. But otherwise, like, I'm not going to seek out a Francis fight. I'm not saying everyone's going to be that way, but I feel like he has to be in the UFC to continue his star to grow versus the UFC needing him for the UFC to continue to grow. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, and on the micro level, I can somewhat agree with you because you just pointed out how the company is growing as a whole. And I want to point out how the division is growing as a whole, and also how, let's say he loses, or let's say he even wins against Ciryl. Ciryl is if not Francis, Ciryl is the champion, right? He
Probably.
argue so.
Yeah.
Even if they lose Francis, you now have Ciryl gone, and so it's not that it wouldn't be that sort of. Man, I am like not good with words right now.
Like it's not a complete loss. Like there's similarities
yeah.
between both guys for sure. Besides the fact that they were at the same gym before, but they both like are very humble for gigantic people that are terrifying. Very soft spoken, very nice.
Well, and in retrospect, so now that we've been talking about this out loud, because I didn't know that that was what's going on with Francis, the whole contract thing. In retrospect, now looking at the way they've propelled Ciryl gone, it actually makes a lot of sense. Like maybe the UFC was thinking like, okay, worst case scenario, something happens, we need another guy to take his place, and Gone is who that guy was. They just pushed him because they really pushed Gone through the rankings. It wasn't like a steady. It was just bloop, 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 bloop. And now he's number one contender. So he's champion, actually. Right?
Yep, he's interim champion. Yep.
So, yeah, that now with everything in perspective, maybe Ngannou is gone. And then he goes from being Francis Ngannou to Francis Ngannou.
Yeah. It just dropped the ooh.
Yeah. So.
Or it's Ngannou. That's how we'd have to start saying it.
Francis gone. No, there's already a gun. You can't do that, man.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, when Francis fights, I'm watching the fight, right? But at the same time, I'm not looking at this from like the fan perspective or like, oh, you got to pay him perspective. If we're just looking as like the UFC as a company, they don't need Francis to continue to do what they're doing. No. That's the thing.
No, you would let him go.
It's different with Conor, right? Yeah. If Conor says, screw you guys, pay me more, I'm going to Bellator. That's a different situation, right? Conor is the reason the UFC has the name it has. But Francis is almost no one else has that kind of leverage. Well, no one has the McGregor leverage. There's some people that are kind of getting different types of leverage, but no one is even in the same realm, right? And for sure, Francis is not there. And I'm not saying I don't think he is warranted a raise if that's what he wants. That's not what I'm suggesting. But obviously, what his team and himself are requesting is beyond what the UFC sees is his value. And the thing with the UFC, they said it before, they have 500, 600 fighters on the roster, right? And how many people probably chomping at the bit to get in there? That's what the thing these morons that complain about fighter pay that don't understand is there's a bajillion other people that will do what they're doing for less.
Yep.
And I'm not saying they're going to be Francis. That's not my suggestion. But if Francis's team is putting his price tag at a place that just does not make sense for the UFC, they can continue to thrive without him. There are other people, and like Tom Aspinall's another guy they're looking at, right, in that heavyweight division. So it's not like this is a division where they're absolutely depleted.
Yeah, well, even though he just lost, you have Chris Dawkins, dude.
Yeah, even though he lost, yeah, that's someone too. Look, gone. Miocic isn't gone yet. Like, we said like he's definitely not on the up and up.
Dude, he looked so ragged, man. Like he looked like
he didn't look great.
Guy.
He didn't look good at all against Francis. But there's guys there, so it's not like marketability wise, like you mentioned, you have Tai Tuivasa too. So it's not like there's absolutely no one there. There's some people to kind of at least sell that heavyweight division. It's not my favorite division. And it never has been, just because there's so many fat guys on there. Like it's always been a top heavy division for me. Like the cream of the crop, I look forward to them because there's actually talent there, and the rest are floppy big boys. I don't care about those guys. But again, it's not just the heavyweight division that makes up the UFC, so that's why they have that room to be like, all right, fine, you don't want to take what we think you're worth, no problem. Go to Bellator, go to PFL, whatever.
And also, I think it's so that plus the fact that Gone exists. Yeah, if Gone didn't exist, I think it would be a different story. But he does.
Again, it's all about timing. It's all about leverage. Case in point, look at Michael Chandler. Right, he comes into the UFC after being at Bellator. He fights Dan Hooker. After beating Dan Hooker, he's number 5, and then his second fight in the UFC is for a title. But it wasn't because it was like right place, right time. Right, Khabib retired. Gaethje just lost to him. Oliveira was going to be the next guy because he had won like 8 in a row. And then they're looking around. They're like, oh, crap, we're already at Chandler in the rankings. I guess we'll throw Chandler in there. So sometimes it's just a timing. It's different things. And right now, the timing, I don't see it being there for Francis to be so demanding.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to make it seem like I think he's in the wrong, but just in terms of like leverage, it does not seem like from what we know that he has it. So there's going to have to be some kind of compromise, obviously, that's going to have to be made for him to stay in the UFC. But it seems very clear whatever their current asking price is, UFC is unwilling to meet it. So if he wins, it seems like we might only see possibly one more fight from Francis in the UFC. And if he loses, it's possible that we don't see Francis in the UFC, maybe not permanently, but at least in the foreseeable future. Now, am I thrilled about that? Not particularly, but I'm not going to stop watching the UFC because Francis isn't there. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's going to be the case for probably almost everyone outside of the country of Cameroon.
And to what I had said earlier, I think the UFC strategy here should be to get the people around him to start whispering in his ear, man. Like, because yeah.
We'll see. So I guess, what do you guys think? Does Francis beat Ciryl? I guess number one. If Francis beats Ciryl, like, do we see him hang around longer than that one fight obligatory fight or whatever it is that's in the contract? Does they repair the issues they have between Francis, his team, and the UFC?